Conflict theory is one of the major sociological paradigms used to analyze society and social change. In a previous video, I discussed structural functionalism, which focuses on stability and cohesion. Conflict theory begins from a very different starting point: the assumption that inequality and struggle over resources are central features of social life. Conflict theory is most closely associated with the work of Karl Marx, who argued that economic relationships form the foundation of social structure. For Marx, the central dynamic shaping society was the relationship between social classes, particularly between those who control productive resources and those who must sell their labor to survive. Marx viewed capitalism as a system built on structural inequality. The working class, or the proletariat, produces goods and services, while the ruling classes control ownership, decision making, and the distribution of wealth. From this perspective, social institutions do not exist primarily to promote social harmony or shared values. Instead, they function to preserve existing power arrangements. Later thinkers expanded Marx's framework. Max Weber argued that inequality cannot be reduced to economics alone. He introduced the idea of status groups, emphasizing that power also operates through race, gender, religion, ethnicity, and social prestige. These additions broadened conflict theory beyond class struggle and laid the groundwork for later developments in critical theory. From a conflict theoretical perspective, society is defined by ongoing competition over scarce resources: wealth, political influence, social status, and cultural legitimacy. As long as these resources are distributed unequally, conflict is unavoidable. Stability, whenever it does exist, isn't evidence of consensus, but of successful control. Social institutions play a central role in this process. Rather than being neutral structures serving collective needs, institutions like government, education, law, family, media, and the economy are understood as mechanisms through which dominant groups maintain their advantage. Laws, norms, and policies are shaped to reflect the interests of those with power, while limiting access to resources for those without power. This doesn't require constant force or oppression. Control is often maintained through legitimacy, by framing existing arrangements as natural, inevitable, or morally justified. When inequality is normalized in this way, resistance can be labeled as deviant, criminal, or irresponsible rather than political. From this perspective, social change isn't driven by gradual adjustment, but by tension and by struggle. Marx argued that under capitalism, conflicts between classes would intensify over time, while reforms like improved wages or working conditions might temporarily reduce tension. They wouldn't resolve the underlying contradictions of the system itself. Marx believed that capitalism inevitably produces alienation. Workers become disconnected from the products of their labor, from the processes of production, from one another, and ultimately from their own sense of purpose. He argued that this alienation fuels dissatisfaction and increases the likelihood of collective resistance. It's important to note that conflict theory doesn't merely describe disagreement or interpersonal conflict. It's a macro level framework focused on structural power and how it's distributed and reproduced. Conflict persists not because individuals are malicious, but because systems reward some at the expense of others. This brings conflict theory into direct contrast with structural functionalism. While functionalists emphasize how institutions contribute to social cohesion, conflict theorists emphasize how those same institutions reinforce existing power dynamics. From a conflict perspective, what functionalists call stability may simply reflect the successful suppression of dissent. Critical theory emerges from the tradition of conflict theory, but as a more applied approach. While conflict theory explains why power structures persist, critical theory seeks to actively question social institutions in order to expose the assumptions, values, and power relations that are embedded in them. It challenges the idea that existing arrangements are inevitable or neutral. Critical theorists argue that many people come to accept systems of power as unchangeable realities. By revealing how institutions contribute to alienation and disempowerment, critical theory aims to make social change thinkable and therefore possible. In short, conflict theory offers a lens for understanding society as a terrain of struggle rather than one of consensus. Its strength lies in illuminating power and structural advantage. Its limitations become clear, though, when examining the cooperation, shared meaning, and everyday interactions of people in a society. That's why sociologists rely on multiple paradigms rather than any single framework. Understanding conflict theory is less about adopting its conclusions and more about recognizing what it helps us to see, especially when existing power structures are treated as normal, natural, or unavoidable. Thanks for taking some time to join me here today. If you connect with these thoughts and ideas and find them useful, you'll find more of this kind of work at Quiet Frontier. It's where I post my work on mind, meaning, purpose, and connection. There's a small storefront and a growing wiki there too. Thanks again for taking the time to watch. Take good care.
Get up every morning at the office by 8. No time to watch the sunrise, man can't be late. Big brother checks the clock